Thank you so much for attending Design for Camera with Kalina Ivanov. I'm Molly Coffey. I am a production designer here in Atlanta and a filmmaker and the creative director of Film Impact Georgia. I am so lucky to have Kalina Ivanov here to talk with me. And before we bring her on, I wanted to gush about her just a little bit. Obviously, most recently, she collaborated on the HBO series Lovecraft Country, which is produced by J.J. Abrams and Jordan Peele and showrun by Misha Green. Obviously, this is an incredible film that's TV show that's coming out right now. Kalina has worked on everything from the movie Wonder, directed by Steven Chbosky, which we talk about a little bit, the movie Long Shot by Jonathan Levine, which we also touch on just a little bit. But she worked on the Emmy-winning Netflix series 7 Seconds. She has earned an Emmy and Art Directors Guild Award for her work on the show Grey Gardens for HBO. She designed the film The Vow and designed the Golden Globe nominated television show Smash. She had a long collaboration with director Robert Redford, culminating in his epic historical drama The Conspirator, and her designs were featured in Perspective magazine. We talk a little bit about Little Miss Sunshine. She also worked on Max, Poltergeist, Rabbit Hole, The Book of Henry, Brown Sugar, Smoke, another Atlanta show called Raising Dion that shot here and is up on Netflix. And we also talk a little bit about her work doing storyboards for, a little film like The Silence of the Lambs and The Manchurian Candidate. So she's super impressive. When Linda Burns asked me who I might want to talk to about production design, I was like, Kalina Ivanov. She was like, oh, okay, do you know her? I was like, no, I don't know her. You just asked me who I would love to speak with. And then magically Linda got in touch with her, and she has made a career of being very giving with information. And so offered to come speak with me, and I appreciate it so much. And we're kind of going to get right to it.
Right.
Cool. So yeah, so thank you, Kalina, so much for your time and speaking with us.
My pleasure. I apparently am a citizen of Atlanta now, so it's only fitting that I should be speaking at this festival.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you did some Raising Dion, and then you did Lovecraft Country. Are there other projects that you've done in Atlanta?
I also did a pilot there, I want to say about 4 years ago, called The Jury. That was my first time in Atlanta.
We definitely have, I think, come a long way in those 4 years as far as an industry.
Oh yeah, there was even a noticeable difference between Raising Dion and Lovecraft Country. Just the crew that I had. In both instances, actually, I kept my crew for both projects, but there was a lot of other changes, and all really, really great, actually, really great people. We had a very beautiful experience on Lovecraft Country in every single possible imaginable way, as humans, as artists, as co-workers. It was a really great experience for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Lovecraft Country is kind of the dream, not just like artistically, but also schedule wise and budget wise, and we'll definitely kind of get into your like working with Misha and just like being able to really put your stamp on the things that you did. I want to touch on, I think we should kind of talk about your path to, getting started and the way that mentors have played a part of your life, and start
there. Right. Well, all I can say is that I'm a double graduate from NYU. I went as an undergraduate to the design program there, which happened to be a graduate program, but I had just arrived in America. I'm really a refugee from Bulgaria, from communist Bulgaria, and I had no clue what graduate or undergraduate meant, because in Europe it's just one university. So I really, they say ignorance is bliss. In my case, was quite true. Had I known what graduate level meant, I probably would have been quite afraid to jump into it. But I was like, yeah, let's do it. I want to do theater. And so I just want to say a couple of things about being a woman in design in the 80s when I was very young and I started. the very first thing the school actually said to me is that I should do costumes. And I just said, no, I am an architect by nature and I want to do sets. And I didn't really think about it very much of how that was just so wrong. I just thought like, no, I'm going to do sets. So in the program, there were only 2 of us at the beginning, only 2 women who did sets. And it was kind of interesting. But it was a very, very good program. It was almost like a boot camp. And I learned so much from it. And I had an amazing teacher there who was the king of Broadway, Oliver Smith, who truly opened my eyes to many, many solutions, design solutions that I used to that day. Even though he works on Broadway and I work in film, the knowledge that he passed on to us, I carry with me. And every time I win an award, I always dedicate it to him. So I hope I win more, just so I can dedicate more awards to Oliver Smith, because everyone needs a great teacher. And then I was very lucky. So after I left the theater program and I worked on Broadway, I quickly realized that my path to designing Broadway musical was very, very narrow, very small, almost impossible. And I became very interested in film because a colleague in a studio said to me, you draw very fast. Have you ever thought of doing storyboards? And I just kind of like a light bulb went into my head and I went like, oh, that sounds fun. And it was. So I'm a self-taught storyboard artist and who fell in love with film and storyboarding and decided to go back to school to get a graduate degree in film. So I went to the NYU graduate film program where I met perhaps the biggest mentor in my life, Jonathan Demme, the director Jonathan Demme. I was just incredibly lucky that he was giving us a class of which we were the crew and I was assigned as his designer. And in the meantime, I had done storyboards for a famous English director. So I told him that and I said, I really would love to storyboard for you. Lo and behold, 45 days later, I am on Silence of the Lambs. And and it's, had I known what Silence of the Lambs would have become, I might have probably, I don't know, probably would have been more scared if I thought that we were doing a classic or anything like that. I just was, again, I was kind of fearless and like, let's do this. And became the storyboard artist. I was the main storyboard artist on it. Had quite an impact in many, many ways, more than one ways. I can give a lecture just on that movie. And in a magical moment, because we all need magical moments when we start in the business, Silence of the Lambs ended up winning 5 Oscars, which truly none of us predicted, could have even imagined. And we had a party and I was just shaking hands with Jonathan to congratulate him. And 2 days later, I get a phone call that he had recommended me for a production design job because he just loved my storyboards because they were done based on just a script. There was no design, there was no locations, there was nothing. I was so early into the process. And the kind of work I did with him,
I want to touch really quick on, like going through your storyboards for Silence of the Lambs, it's really interesting. I mean, it takes an understanding of where to put a camera, and like, but you didn't have a ton of experience necessarily with that, yet you so smartly were able to figure out, where you would put the camera. And that's really, I don't know, that's really interesting to me and kind of, I think, taps into that fearlessness that you have of like your point of view, which I think is probably part of what has allowed you to have the success that you've had.
I think that's, well, you're very observant, but don't forget that I had just had 3 years of film school and I was making films. And that I had self-taught myself as a storyboard artist by buying books like about the art of Raiders of the Lost Ark and looking at the best. And I think that I think I just was born to do this. I just had this, my brain worked like a camera. I totally understood. And then I needed to learn more about lenses. But film school and then anyway graduate program, because they throw you immediately, you have to direct and you have to write your own thing. Oh my God, writing my own thing, that was the scariest thing on earth. But I was not ready for that. But it teaches you how to tell a story, and it teaches you how to tell a story visually. And I shot people's films. So this knowledge of lenses and knowledge of camera and just the sheer love I had for film carried me, and I was incredibly passionate about film, still am, very much, but I also have always been very conceptual. And I think if you take the conceptual side from theater, the way a set is a gesture in theater, and combine that with a camera in film, you can get a really interesting sort of aesthetic going that I have developed over the years. But I think one of my strengths as a designer is that I really, because I come through storyboards in the film world, I design for camera. And I would say that that should be the epitaph on my body of work. She designed for camera. And I just think that I just really, really think like the camera when I design, or when I talk to directors, or when I talk to cinematographers, which is why I have such a strong relationship with the DPs on all my projects. I mean, I love these guys or gals, or, it's a very, very, we depend on each other, and it's a very close relationship that I try to forge on every project.
For sure. You talk about kind of how special Silence of the Lambs was, and not knowing it at the time, and that kind of brings me to Little Miss Sunshine, because a project like that does end up being this like really, really special thing, and like making your mark on something like that, and the doors that it opens up. But at the same time, there are a couple of jobs that I've turned down along the way because of a lack of resources, or, just how hard it was going to be, and it's part of its experience, but part of it's a connection to the project and the script. Like, how do you decide to take a show like Little Miss Sunshine, or do you just fall into something like that?
Well, Little Miss Sunshine is an interesting story because, it wasn't supposed to come to me. It was the directors were working with a different designer who's amazing. But he became unavailable. The project got pushed so many times that he became unavailable. And Peter Seraph, who used to be Jonathan Demme's assistant, literally everything in my life ends up going back to Jonathan Demme, one way or the other. And Peter Seraph called me. I'd heard about the script, but I also heard it had another designer. So when he called me, I was really surprised, and I said, "Okay, well, exciting. May I read the script?" Because I had heard it was very good, and it was the funniest thing I'd ever read. I could not stop laughing in a most natural way. And it was just so deep, and the characters were so well written. Everything was on the page, everything. And I just told Peter, I have to do this. But one of the main reasons they wanted to bring me on was because the script originally took place, the drive took place from Maryland to Florida. So they wanted an East Coast designer because they were going to do it in LA. So they wanted somebody who was familiar with East Coast look. And lo and behold, I mean, like I had to win the director. So it was a very extensive design interview process, and there were a lot of competition. But I think I ended up flying to LA on my own dime to meet them, because I had a feeling that this wasn't going to happen unless we were in the same room and they could feel my passion. We're now forced into the Zoom world, but there's nothing like sitting in a room with a person and being able to really talk about the characters and just feel that a passion or vibe that this person has. And I think that was the right call, because literally half an hour after I walked out of there, they offered me the job, and I was super excited, and I stayed in LA. And it was a bit of sacrifice on my part, because I had to put myself up because there was no budget to put me up, etc. But we worked it out. I got help from the producers, everybody. We did the best we can, so that I can stay. And then but here's the biggest irony of all of that. So I'm brought in to do the East Coast look, right? So after a week of scouting LA, realizing that there's it's so limiting. There's only a few neighborhoods in Pasadena and a few neighborhoods here and there that you can do that, but you constantly into palm trees, and we don't have the money to uproot palm trees and stuff. So I finally went to them and I said, have you ever considered doing this Albuquerque to LA? and it just, the light bulb went off in everybody's head. I figured out what the route should be, what is 800 miles that they do, or 400, whatever it was. I figured it out, and I just said, this is something you can do in 2 days. It's got a great look. We can do Albuquerque in LA. We can do LA after LA. You have beauty pageants. We went to see them as research. They're really disturbing. And and they have them in LA, and it didn't change the story. It doesn't change the story. That's not the important part of it. The important part of it is the emotional arc of the characters. Not necessarily where you start or where you end. As long as it makes sense for the story, you start point and end point. And that's what we did. And I think that it liberated everyone, and we were able to shoot in more than one direction. But again, that's like thinking for the camera, thinking like, okay, I can get you the houses, and I can get you the designs. I can get you everything, except you're very limited. You can only look this way, and you can only look that way, and then you don't have a reverse. And why? Why?
Something like that. And you're, and you as a production designer trying to like win a battle, like of what you think is like the best thing for your job, are you making the pitch like on a creative aspect, or are you making it on a budgetary aspect, and like what that means? Is it a combination of both? Does it depend on who you're speaking with? Like, I know that, I win a lot of battles, but I also lose a lot of battles, when I'm trying to get what I want.
Well, you literally learn to pick your battles. I mean, that's the one lesson of experience, I could say. I would say at the beginning, I was fighting all battles. Now I just pick them very carefully. I would always, first and foremost, come out of the creative. I think that's the most important thing. I think the budget part is somehow always wrapped into it, but it's the less important part simply because we can solve that. But what we cannot, and we can solve every budget problem somehow. Creative problems are far trickier and more important to solve, because that actually has a much bigger outcome on the success of the project than a budget problem. Does that make sense? I mean, yeah. Budget problems are more the meat and potatoes of the work that we do, but the creative is truly what we get hired for at the end of the day. What makes designers different is their creative solutions.
Mm-hmm. So on a show like Lovecraft Country, obviously you can build all of those sets and you really get to start in the concept drawing and go from there. Like a show like Little Miss Sunshine, which is location based, how do you get the looks that you want? How do you really get, first off, making sure that the locations that you're being shown are what you want? Like, one of the big things I know is like I try to make sure that locations aren't being shown to the director that aren't like what I want, like how do you get what you want in a location-based show?
Well, I mean, believe it or not, I also did concept sketches for Little Miss Sunshine too. I have a sketch for the pageant and stuff. But in general, I always start from a book of images. So I always make some, even back then, now it's very typical that every designer comes in with a book of images, a lookbook. Even back then, where we weren't making all these digital presentations and stuff, because we're talking 2005. We shot it in 2005. That's 15 years ago, believe it or not. It feels forever for me. It feels like, oh, that's an old movie. But I always had a book of images, and I always had a central image. And one of the painters that I based all my concepts and my palette on was oh boy, I'm gonna have to come back to you because the name just literally flew out of my head. I literally have to come back to you about the name. But anyway, it was a very strong image, and I just asked locations to work with that, and then we would I would always in general though, I would always take down the volume of images of locations and present about 5 choices. And I would go look at them. I would narrow it down to 5, let's say 7. For the house, of course, that was the most important thing. We had, I think, about 7 choices. I knew the house. The minute I walked into it, I knew. The minute the woman showed up and opened the door, I knew it was going to be the house. Houses have spirits. They literally, you can tell when a house has a spirit. There was one that the directors liked more, but the owner was truly crazy, and I was so afraid that she was going to throw us out in the middle of the shoot. When people are strange in the first time you visit the house. It's not going to get better. It's just going to get stranger. And the wood was very dark, and I wanted it to be a cheerful prism. That was my concept for the house in Little Miss Sunshine. I wanted it to be a cheerful prism of paneling, of wood paneling. And so we found this house in Burbank with a honey colored wood paneling for days. We actually even added more, which also happened to have a basement. Very unusual for LA. They don't have basements. And the opening scenes was in a basement as per the script. And it was just wonderful. It was really great. It was, but I must have seen at least 7 to 10 houses for that. But I knew that one. I had to talk the directors into it because, as I said, they had a different first choice. But you know, that's your job, to talk people into it, something you believe in. And if they really, really don't like it, then you have to accept their choice. You know, you can't go against that. So there's always another very good choice you can go to, you know.
At what point, I'm curious, like, at what point in your career did you end up getting an agent as a production designer? And like, how has that influenced like the jobs that you've gotten to interview for and up for?
I got an agent on my very first show. I did not have an agent while I got the job. And that is because Jonathan Demme recommended me to the directors. He was the executive producer. They went with me. I negotiated my own fee, had zero knowledge about negotiation. I don't recommend it. And on that show, the DP had an agent, and the costume designer, I think pretty much, he knew everybody on that set. He came to visit and he became my agent. I was with him for maybe a couple of years, and I realized that we weren't a very good fit. He wasn't a bad person or anything. We were just not a very good fit. And I did a movie called Smoke in New York. It's one of my favorite movies of my career, even though it's a very long time ago. It's a beautiful film. But the production manager had a really, really interesting agent that I had really liked, who was representing Dante Ferretti and one of my favorite production designers. And so I met with them in LA, and they loved me, and the rest is history. And I kind of stayed with that agency till they split up, and I went with one of the people that they split up. But basically, I've kind of had more or less the same agent for many, many, many years. I mean, I like my agents. I have a very good relationship with my agents, so I don't really... I'm very happy, and it's a small agency. I always wanted to be with a small agency. I never wanted to be with a big one. It's a personal preference. It's what fits you and where you feel comfortable. You're going to have to do this 75% of the legwork anyway, no matter what. Right. I think that if people think that their agents can miraculously make their careers, that's not necessarily true. They can help you. They can help you when you're in trouble. They can help you in negotiating. They can coach you a bunch of things. But in general, it is you, your personality, your talent, your connections that is going to eventually land a job and forge a career.
So after a show like Little Miss Sunshine, like, where do you go professionally from there?
Okay, so I have a strategy that I have followed throughout my entire career, and you can look at my resume and you'll see that I've accomplished it. If I do a comedy, my next project cannot be a comedy. I go to a drama. If I do a low budget, then I do a big budget. If I do a big budget, then I do a low budget, or something artistic, not necessarily low budget, but something that is less commercial, put it that way. And so I have covered, and if I do something, then I want to do television, et cetera, et cetera. And television now is probably the most interesting field, where the most interesting projects are, actually. So I've been doing a lot of more television later, but I went for a good 10, 15 years with never doing television. Just simply things have changed, and you go where the good projects are. So after Little Miss Sunshine, I got my first big studio film because I needed to. You know, I had to prove that I can do studio films. So I did a movie called Maid of Honor, which was in 3 different places: LA, New York, and London, and Scotland. That's 4 already. And I had to run multiple crews, and I had to deal with a much bigger budget, and et cetera. And it was a romantic comedy. And I remember towards the end of that, I told the line producer that I was going to look for an artistic drama. And he just smiled at me and said, "So you're not interested in making money?" And I was just like taken aback because I never made my choices based on that. I made my choices based on where I wanted to go creatively. Now, you don't always have a choice, but you can make it a choice. You can turn down work and you can make it a choice. And because literally after Little Miss Sunshine, I got so many offers for films that took place on the road, road pictures. For some reason, everybody thought that's the only thing I could do. So, so you see, it's my job to prove that that is not the only thing. And and then eventually I wanted to do Poltergeist. I wanted to do a movie that had a different genre. There was a ghost story, and then it had a lot of visual effects and a lot of green screen and a lot of special effects. Because as women, we are not always handed those jobs, or so it's really important also for me to be learning and to be growing with each job. And that's where I'm at. I mean, that's literally where I'm at, and I'm not afraid to say no to a project if I don't think that I'm the right fit for it. I mean, I think that's fair, because they will find a designer who is absolutely the right fit for them. So and I'm very driven by passion. I need to be passionate about the material.
So you've done a couple of things like along your career, like something like Long Shot, which I know we spoke about, has had over 100 sets to it, which is just absolutely insane. And and something like Wonder kind of has its own problems with the fact that it was set in New York City, but you shot it in Vancouver. So like, how do you approach something like that?
Well, I don't choose the city where a film takes place, nor do I write a script and tell the story of where it should take place, right? So Wonder was a project I really wanted to do. I just really wanted to do something about kindness, because the motto was "Be kind." That was the motto of the book and of the story. And I met the writer of the book in Brooklyn, and she took me around and she showed me, once I landed the job, obviously, but it was written for Brooklyn, and it was a very personal story to her of how she wrote this book. And she had children, and she showed me the school, etc. She showed me a lot of the places that were the inspiration for the story. And we wanted to really preserve her vision and the heart of the book. And the book was so big, it's so popular, and it is translated to more than 40 languages, including Bulgarian, my own language. And it is a beautiful, beautiful story. But we were in Vancouver, and okay, that's fine. I mean, I can figure out how to make Vancouver look like Manhattan and how to make it look like New York. But Vancouver is the only Canadian town that doesn't have townhouses, because both Toronto and Montreal do. So you can create a townhouse look, which is what Brooklyn and the characters were supposed to live. So I had a very big battle to win, which was to convince the producers that we needed to build the entire townhouse, all the interiors and the exterior. And it was, it took a little bit of convincing. But I did models, I did sketches, and I had the director really wanted it. And I think that I proved to them by taking them to all the possible locations. And I proved to them that it was going to be a really difficult cheat, and it was going to take away from the story, and it was not going to feel authentic. And then we don't have a movie, So.
And the choice to make models is one of those things that like on a lot of shows, we don't necessarily have the luxury for like little things like that, but like you like with your work have taken you take a lot of time like digging into the backgrounds of the actors, from like really getting into like the nuts and bolts of their personalities before you design. You do a lot of concept drawings, and sketches and things like that, like actually getting to do models. Like, do you think that that's a real, like an integral part of the communication process? And again, like going back to what we said before about like kind of winning the battles of like what you want.
Yes. I think you would find out, we had, I'm a co-founder of the Production Designers Collective, and we invited 4 cinematographers to speak to us about how they work with production designers. And all 4 of them said that they prefer models to SketchUp. And that was very interesting. And the reason being is because when you have a physical model, and we're talking about white models, sometimes they're very crude. They don't have to be like fancy schmancy models. But what you really get is the closest thing to what the space is going to feel like. And if you do a SketchUp model, the lens in the SketchUp can go through walls that in reality, it will not be able to go. So sometimes it gives a kind of a false idea of what you could do camera-wise with SketchUp. SketchUp is very useful. I use it too, but it's very useful for the art department and for very quick when you're sending to LA, when your showrunner is in LA and you're in New York and you're sending them, oh, look, this is what the police station will look like. So anyway, but I love physical models. And, you know, I mean, a PA can sometimes help you make a model. They're not complicated to make. I mean, you just print a drafting and you put it on foam core, you know, but I think that I can really encourage designers to do that. I think that, and it's particularly helpful in this particular situation where I had to convince the producers, convince not just the line producer, but the main producers, every artist involved in this had to be convinced that we could not, that was the only way we could do the brownstone. And we did it beautifully. So, and it worked. And people actually think they know the brownstone. We shot in Brooklyn. And I'm like, okay, because it doesn't exist, because it was all on stage, but sure, you go with that.
So a decision like that, in order to have time to do it, has to be made pretty early in the process, because like a build takes a lot of time and a lot of resources.
Yes. I work very fast. I'm a very high energy person and I work very fast. And particularly at the beginning, I find it that at the beginning, I need to work fast because it's all my inspiration is really alive at the beginning. And before it gets taken away from me piece by piece and every decision gets questioned, I need to go with that. I need to go. I'm a great believer in the initial instinct, in your first instincts. It's like your first research images, your first instincts are so on the ball, and the more people start questioning it, the more you start questioning it, the more you start back away from your first choices. So it's always good to go back to that. And that's why I love making those design books, because I would go back and go like, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's the color I was seeing, you know? So yeah, but I work very fast. I'm very high energy.
So where do you think that confidence comes from in your point of view? Because, you know, particularly with women, you know, we suffer from, women are 70% more likely to have imposter syndrome, you know, than a man, like going into a situation. Like where does that confidence come from for you?
Oh, I don't know. I've always had it. I mean, I think when I was 16, I told my boyfriend, I'm going to study this, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to design theater, and then and he was just like, what? You know, most people want to know what the prom is. And I was like, I was going to do this and I was going to do that. I don't know. Here's what, it's not that I don't have moments that I question myself or what I'm doing or anything like that. It's not that I don't have self-doubt. It's what I have learned is that perhaps one of the most important things when you are leading a team and you're leading a department is that you make a decision and you believe in your decision, you stick to it, and you have a really good chance of making that decision come to life in a beautiful way. If you start vacillating too much, I'm not sure your decision is going to become better. It's just going to become more muddled because you're going to lose time and you're not going to have time to execute it. Does that make sense? So I have learned what I design a lot from the gut. I have learned to just really follow my instincts and really believe in them. And sometimes I am able to articulate even what I was after I draw it. But I just have very strong instincts and very strong kind of believes that I need to, this is the thought, this is the idea, and I'm going with it. and follow me. And then we did this on Lovecraft, and I had a showrunner there that we were a match in heaven. She is a young woman who is so determined and so ballsy, and whoever put us together did a very good job, because we just matched each other in determination and in like, let's just see where we can go and where we can take this show. And you know, it was great.
Yeah, there's kind of no other word to describe Lovecraft Country than just bold. I mean, the decision making, like at the time that we're recording this, the 4th episode has aired, and every single episode has felt almost like a different genre. Like obviously it's all tied together, but they're almost like these individual bottle episodes that really explore these really powerful themes and really say something about how we're all feeling currently, yet like, you know, that wasn't the world. I mean, it was the world that you were living in at the time that you're making, but we're in such a magnified version of that world, like right now as we're consuming this media, that it was brilliant, almost like beyond her years for Misha at the time that you guys made the show. Like, did you know what the show was going to be at the time that you were making it?
Well, I really chased that job. I had read the book and I really believed in that show. I really believed in its potential, in its worlds, and I just really believed in that it was going to be a great adventure, but that the big themes that drove the book, Misha will only make them bigger and more poignant. And knowing her work from underground, and so anyway, and her really great energy, and a very, very smart woman. And I think that it was, I always knew it was going to be a big show, put it that way. I believed in it, but then I also just really wanted to do it for me. It was just such a challenge because every single genre is represented in it. And when you get to episode 7, just about every single genre is represented in one episode, you know? so it's like nothing else. And it's such a huge scope, such a huge canvas to paint with. And I was so happy. I was so happy every day on the job because I wanted this. It was like, okay, I can really, really rise to this challenge. This is beyond anything ever that anybody has thrown at me. And okay, we can do this. Bring it on. It was great.
So one of the big things, like I'm bringing up right now, you know, your original design for the Artem Lodge exterior. Like, at what point did you draw this? Because I mean, it is so close to what, at the end of the day, you know, it ended up being.
Oh yeah, I am very early on. So the way what happened with this is we were supposed to start pre-production in January, but the studio felt that that we were not, that they needed to work a little bit more on the script and the storylines before they let us go to Atlanta. And so I was in LA with a very small team. And I started a concept work. Yeah, this is the concept sketch, and I'll tell you a little bit about that process. But what I would do is I would scout Atlanta for a week. Then I would go back and work for 2 weeks in LA. Then I would scout Atlanta for a week, and I was back and forth all the time. And I would present my choices of locations. And one of the things is that you very quickly discover that Atlanta is a fairly young city in its architecture. So there's not a lot of old architecture that we needed, and we needed like something that was from 1790s. And we found a location that was an hour away in Greenville, and it wasn't big enough. And so, but I loved the bottom of it. I thought it had the best bones, and the owner was very interesting. And he was going to let us shoot there with no restrictions, because a lot of things in Atlanta have weddings. And so we could not get 5 or 7 days to shoot in a row, because there was always a wedding at the end of the week. And we had 7 shooting days. Anyway, it was kind of interesting. But so immediately, and again, when I see it, I make a decision, and I propose this decision, I present this decision. And so I saw this place, and I knew it was the right place. It was. So my very first job was to show Misha what we can do with it, and how the visual effect and what the actual look it would be, because the dome was written into the script, and it was very important that the lab is there. And so that sketch then I would send to the concept artist at Rodeo, Dick Ferrand. He is amazing, and he is a well-known concept artist. And Dick we worked very closely. He would listen to me. I would give him a book of images with the architecture. I wanted to combine Tudor architecture with the Biltmore estate in Asheville, because I wanted to combine the American robber barons with the Tudors, with Henry VIII, two of the worst people on the planet. I just wanted them because it was just such a good mix. And I wanted to mix the styles. I didn't want it to be purist Tudor or purist Asheville. And so that we can create our own version of architecture and our own version of a lodge and our own sect. And he really understood that, and he did a beautiful job interpreting it. But my sketches are very, very detailed and very close to where I would like people to go, you know. So when I work with a concept artist, I really expect them to capture the spirit of the concept, because again, you know, my job is to be the architect of this.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up because you mentioned the laboratory, because that's another one that you have a really beautiful concept drawing of to the final project.
This is a wonderful artist. By that time that we got to do the laboratory, we had already designed, actually we had a SketchUp model of the space, etc. So we were able to send, this is the sketches by Vicky Pewey. She is an amazing concept artist out of Canada. And we were able to send her our set designs, and I was able, again, to talk her through what I was after and give her a very detailed lookbook of like, I need this element here, and I need that element here, and the painting and all the choices of painting. So when she's putting all the elements into the sketch, they already designed for her. So, you know, and then I wanted those, and look how close it is. And then I really wanted every rib of the glass dome to end in this light fixture with two snakes holding it. So again, the idea of danger and menace and teeth was I played a lot throughout the whole show. There is a theme throughout the show. There is a visual theme. And in the corridor, when we build the corridors and we build the rooms for the characters, in the corridor from the very beginning, I had asked my set designer, Chad Frey, I said, like, please give me this teeth, like the shoguns. I want it to feel like when they're walking underneath it, that they're almost in a very fancy prison. So yes, so you can see the teeth. We worked a lot on these sharp teeth and sharp edges. And then in the floor in the lab, when we did the half sun, it's based, like you can see that each triangle is also, you can interpret it as a tooth. And I know this is very abstract, but it's always good for me to have a very strong visual concept that I give my people, my coworkers, my team, and that we fly with it and we work with it, and it becomes a very coherent design that way.
Absolutely. You're even I mean, you have so many different people that you have to arm with the information in order for them to do their jobs, from green to scenic to the carpenters to set deck to the concept artists and things like that, like and you know, all of that takes time, you know. How do you juggle all of those things? And you know, sometimes I know that Lovecraft Country was really great because you had more money and more time than you normally would in television, but it is also still television.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, yes, what I did have is I had the right team with me. I mean, I absolutely loved every art director and every set designer that came and worked with us. My graphic artists, oh my God, amazing. Everybody, just truly. And there was just such a great camaraderie. I mean, one of the things is that I really want the art department to also have fun while we're working. And that's very important because it shows in the work. And it's on me. I have to stay after everybody. I mean, very often me and the graphics people were the last people to leave, and very often I was the last. Because I truly sometimes also need everybody to leave so I can have some time to think on my own without being interrupted. I think the hardest thing is that you start drawing and people start interrupting you with questions. So sometimes I would just really close the door and put a sign. I made graphics, made me a beautiful sign with one of the crocodiles from the sculpture of Titus's sculpture. And it said, "Do not disturb." And people, and you're like, "No, I'm drawing. You cannot ask me a question. Email me, I'll answer it." Yeah, I have to. There are times that I have to protect myself, and I need that creative time to be in the zone. But yeah, it's a little complicated. It is a little complicated, but I also had very sympathetic producers, and I asked for a few Saturdays that they would give me where I can catch up with concept art, and they understood how important this was. And these concept artists that I was working with, I mean, you hear in Canada, LA, you know, I am working with them at night because they're sending me the materials of the evening. And so then when I go home, I'll have dinner, and then at 10 p.m. I'm answering, giving them the notes. I'm marking these drawings and going like, do this, do that. No, oh, that's not what I meant, etc. But the important part is for the set, for the final product to look beautiful. So we started with the lab, and then we talked Michel into doing the dinner scene there because we actually couldn't find, to be honest, we couldn't find an appropriate location for it. And we said, let's make this space, which is the ritual space, the dinner and the lab and the big ritual, because it makes sense with who Samuel was, that he would do that. And so it worked very well for us because we built this big set, and we really were able to really use it a lot, and to you know, and we redress it, and the decorating department was amazing. They were local people. They worked with me on Raising Dion. I love them all. They were great. Mm-hmm. So the black and white sketch, so you can see the black and white sketch, again, I did that back in February, and we started official pre-production in March. So this is in LA, and based on the same location that I had already loved. And what I'm showing Misha here is, look, we can be in this particular room, but look, through the visual effect, we can create a really large library, because it was a small room, but it's one character who walks into it. And I just felt like, okay, and he has to find a book. The action actually isn't that, you're not going to walk for half an hour to find a book. Right. You know, it is, the pacing of our show is very quick, and it was very obvious that was going to be like that. And so the visual effect is just the fourth wall. I'm basically showing, look what we can do. And then we developed it again with the same artist, Deek Farrand. We developed the look of the room. It's really great.
It's funny that you mentioned, you know, back when you were learning how to do this, you mentioned Raiders of the Lost Ark. So then to get to make the 4th episode of Lovecraft Country, like how surreal was that?
Yes, yes. If you want to learn about storyboarding, or just in general about concept art, nobody can beat Steven Spielberg. I mean, he has done so many interesting movies, and the Jurassic Park ones, and just franchises. And he is such a good filmmaker. And even if you don't love his films, you have to appreciate the incredible craft that goes into making them. And one can learn a lot from that. And so I think that I always consider myself a student. I mean, I'm still learning, and I always watch people's movies, and I love the concept books and the concept art that comes out of it, and I am constantly evolving and learning. But yes, we had, to Misha, episode 4 is Goonies. To me, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark. We all had our different interpretations of it. This was a really interesting thing. So the statue, this is Titus and his crocodiles. This sculpture was not in the script. The scene in the original version of the script, our characters, our adventurers, go through the floor into the mysterious chamber. And I had this image in my head that Titus needed to be present, physically present. And I presented her with this idea of a sculpture. And I said, and you know, they could go through the sculpture to go down. And Misha was very mischievous about it. And she said, yeah, but then you have to tell me how all the beats happen. And and I said, no, we'll come up with it together. And we worked on it together, and it was great. She really accepted this idea. And I think it gave us a very dynamic image and a very interesting way of getting into the other space. Yeah, we had the amazing sculptors doing this. But yeah, so you see my little black and white sketch, and then you see what happened. Then you see the concept artist, and then you see the set, and you can see how the set looks exactly like the concept. And this is in Atlanta in a beautiful building, but it's an office mall basically. So we're covering a pizzeria, we're covering a coffee shop. We created a museum in the middle of this beautiful, beautiful architecture that has now met modernity in the most unpleasant way.
And it's interesting too, just from like a production design standpoint, the show did actually accomplish it feeling large and grandiose, while at the same time, if you really think about it, you do see so little of the museum, which, you know, is such a small part of the episode, but it really is like an example of like, I don't know if there were how many other things there were that got cut, you know, that you guys did, but it really does. I mean, it gets you exactly where you need to go by showing as little as possible, which is something that we always have to do.
Well, that was the thing, because I mean, I had like an amazing location down in Macon for this, the old train station, but I don't even think we could have begun to dress that. I mean, there are also some really logistical issues with like how big can you go? At some point you're going to run out of money, you know, and so I think that going to that location, which I really pitched multiple times, and it was rejected multiple times, and then I kept coming back to it, and then I added the statue to it, and it ended up being very efficient and effective. And I also, you have to remember, there's so much, when you read the script, you have to break it down in terms of like, well, where's the action? Well, the action is in the tunnels. If you look at that episode, the most amount of pages took place in the tunnels. The least amount of pages actually took place in the museum. You know, it's an introduction to it, and off we go. You know, we got to find the, you know, there was a scene that got cut of the security guard office, which we did make, but, you know, that wasn't necessarily the museum, right? And you're very astute to point out that truly you don't need more than that. You need to introduce it. But to me, it was, you need to introduce Titus because it is his vault, it is his spirit, and he is the original sin basically, and he is the evil force in a way in the project. So he needed to have a physical presence, because I'm not sure that the portrait in episode 2 gives you enough of getting to understand Titus. And I also think it tells you something about his ego, or the male ego, which we deal a lot in the show. And I just thought it was kind of very, very interesting. And again, the crocodiles, I know Misha said, like, why crocodiles? And I say, because they are my personal shogots. They have teeth. and that's where the whole theme with the teeth and the moon ray hitting the tooth, and that being the clue of how to open the door. It all, as you can see, is all part of the design. Now, this is the plank room, yes. So this is a case of where you build smaller portions of the set and the rest of it visual effects creates. And there were a couple of sets. One was obviously the practical of where they start on the beam and they end with the beam. But we also had a green screen set of where the actors had to do a lot of the jumping, and they're supported by wires and stuff. So there's a fairly amount of combination between visual effects and physical. This is the physical set. Yeah, that's one end of it. That's the door. And then the other end of it is the beginning. So that's kind of the extension. That's this, how big the set was. But we did have 60 feet in between the two portions, so the actors can run back and forth and they can feel they're running a really long span.
And as far as your research goes, because there's beautiful imagery like carved into this door, and like really thinking about what that would be like in the process, like where is that in the research of it?
Okay, it's a really good question. We looked at Petra a lot, you know, like the beautiful. I looked at a lot of Indian temples, just for the way people carve into stone and the way the stone ages and the carvings age. But in general, in terms of creating Adam, God, Eve, we went to more of the Renaissance Dürer kind of representation. He was a really big influence. I think his drawings, because they're so because they were actually woodcuts anyway, and they kind of really worked with the door. And then we had a sculptor make them, and he did a beautiful job. So anyway, so there were multiple influences. I mean, we were creating our own language. I was quite free, even though we were in 1955. I was quite free to go and be inspired by many different parts of the world and different religions and different things, because we were creating our own mythology. I mean, the floor in the lab in episode 2 is based on Babylonian art, you know, so I could pull inspiration from things that I just think emotionally are right for the scene.
Do you think that, because I know that you've spoken a couple of times before about how, you know, being a traveler, like, I think as a designer, one of the things is that I just pay attention to everything always. I love textures. I travel a lot, and I pay attention to, you know, everything from what motivates people to the, you know, the architecture and the things they live in. How much do you think that's played into your effectiveness as a designer?
Oh, I think people should travel, period. I mean, but that also may be the function of the fact that I grew up in a communist country and I could never leave for many years. We could never go to a Western country. And so I think that as a child, my curiosity about the world was, of course, huge. And I can go on forever about talking about the lack of research and the lack of how I wanted to study Japanese gardens, and there wasn't a single book or image about them, but plenty about Russian gardens, and etc. And so that limitation of research and ability to travel, I think, has really informed my life and has made me travel a lot. And at the end of every job, my husband and I and our son, whenever he wishes to come with us, we always travel. And I'm glad. My son's been on planes since he was 9 months old. So he's a traveler.
So I would be remiss not to kind of mention the fact that you put a bunch of sets underwater for this episode.
Yes,
and I want to touch on the breakdown, I guess, of like where the design ends, and then you're working with stunt people, you're working with effects department, you're working with the camera, and like how does all of that intertwine in the planning and the design of these?
Well, we start first. We have to come up with the physical solution for how are we going to do these characters go from knee deep water to chest deep water, right? That was the first thing that that was the first part of the puzzle. Do we do each tunnel in a separate tank, or do we do them all in the same tank? Because you're going to build a tank, right, to put the water in. And this is where, as a designer, you really need technical art directors around you, people who will advise you. And to their credit, they came up with the idea that we're going to do it in one tank, and the water's going to stay at about 5.5 feet height. But the tunnels are going to be at different heights. So we start with a very high tunnel so the water is only touches their feet to the ankles. And then you start walking down, the actors start walking down, and you start slowly going into the deeper and deeper waters. So we designed this diagram. I called it the intestines because it really looked like a bunch of intestines put together. But they were the 3 different tunnels, and we named them and we designed them. And then when you sculpt them, it's very much like, it's actually the sculpting of them is very organically made. So you can go and visit your sculptors and your team, and you can add to it or take away from it. It's very interesting. It's very organic. It's very sculptural. And oh, that's the ship, yeah. And so, but the biggest challenge with the tunnels is that you have to waterproof them, so seriously waterproof them, so they don't leak, paint doesn't leak, and doesn't make the water dirty. Because the biggest challenge is to keep the water actually very clean, so the camera can go underneath and shoot underneath. And that was something we had a sample with a sealer for a month submerged in water to make sure that it was going to work. And I would be remiss if I don't give huge props to my team, because everybody contributed to this. There is no way that I can be a specialist on sealing paint. You need your experts on that. I'm not an expert on all of these things. I just know that we have meetings together and we put our brains together, and you need to have the right team. And then we work with the special effects people. And then because they are building the tank, and we went from a rectangular tank to a round tank, and things change. And then the elevator came in its own tank. So there was a second tank. I mean, we had 3 elevators, by the way. And one was built specifically to be submerged. And one traveled from location to stages. And one stayed on the stage and went up and down. But I had the right team. You need the right team, you know.
Yes. So obviously we're very excited about where the show is going from here, and I can't wait and obviously the show is just so special. So where do you go after Lovecraft Country? Like what's
That I did tell Misha at the end, I said, I'm going to have a really hard time choosing another show after this, because it's going to be very hard to top. I feel like I've worked my entire career and I've experimented with different styles and different genres to get to Lovecraft, where I got to do all of that on a very big scale. And now what? Now what do I conquer? I mean, I don't know. I am actually working on a project. I am in pre-production on a project with Netflix, which is very interesting. It's very different. It's a completely different animal, but it does go from all I can say is that it goes from 1947 to 2007. So it does have a very big scope. It's very political. It's very different. It is way more realistic. It doesn't have fantasy sequences in it. But yeah, I would love to do a musical. If you want to know what I really want to do, is I want to do a musical. But like, not a realistic musical, a musical.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So what do you think, obviously at the forefront of your mind right now, if you're prepping a show, is like, what does the landscape of working look like in the future? And but I think the question might be a little bit more existential in that, how do you think that now is going to influence the future of the job of production designing in a way that's going to stick around after, hopefully assuming that this ends at some point.
Well, once we get a vaccine, it will end. It will be like the flu, basically. Well, I think many things are going to come out of this. Many. Where design is going to go specifically, I think that I can only look at it in a very positive way, because I think that where we're actually now being asked to figure out many more things, and our solutions are really affecting people's lives. So I think that then we are given more prep time, and that's always good. We're also going to be given bigger teams, because it will take a little bit more for you're going to have 2 on-set dressers. 2 people can lift a couch, because people can't just jump in now and help everybody, right? And so I think there's some very interesting positive things are going to come out. I think technology, we're pushing technology now. I think with the virtual scouting, that's going to push technology into different different areas, all for the better as far as I'm concerned, particularly on a TV show where you have to do so much scouting. I think that's great. I think the fact that we're not going to sit in a van and chat forever, great, awesome, more efficient. I think I look at it as a very positive time, but I do see great many changes in technology. I think we're going to develop the technology that Mandalorian has started, which is very, very expensive at this moment. I think eventually within 5 years that will go down, and we will start shooting more like that, and stage work will be more. All of that is good. All of this is good, all of it. I don't have any, I think we just adapt and we figure it out. But I think the designers actually are going to have a bigger responsibility, and that's all good. That's good.
So before we wrap everything up, I do want to talk a second about the Production Design Collective that you co-founded, because, well, you've been so giving. We're friends on Facebook, and you share every episode of Lovecraft Country, your concept drawings and the sets, and you've always been so giving with information and participating in this, which we're so thankful for. Why did you think it was important to start the Production Designers Collective, and like what are you doing now during quarantine with all of that?
Well, first of all, it's one of my life missions has always been to educate everyone about what production design is. I think so many people don't understand what we do and the importance of what we do visually, that we create the all the world that we invite cameras and actors in. And not enough respect is given to production design. And all I can say is like, Indie Spirit Awards, can you please give us an award? And so it's been my mission, life mission, to educate people and to tell them what we do and for them to understand, because I believe that if they understand what we do, then they themselves will maybe want to become production designers or really pay attention to it, or really DPs, young DPs, will understand that they can't have good cinematography without good design, and that we depend on each other. And I just feel it's a mission for me. And the Production Designers Collectives came out of that mission because I met this woman in Weinberg, a colleague of mine, a younger colleague of mine, who came to a lecture I was giving. And she had approached me and she said, I've always wanted to bring designers together. And I just looked at her and I said, and I've always wanted to create a production designer society. Let's talk. So we met over coffee and we decided that the digital format is the best way for us to go. I was insistent that we cannot charge money, that we have to be free if we want to reach the most amount of people. And we now have 600 members. And we publish a magazine every 2 months, and we interview 4 designers for the forum, and we interview, and we do a sketch gallery, we do all sorts of things, and we Inbal puts together books that people should read and materials and etc. And it's geared towards production designers, and it's brought us globally, and we have dialogue with people in Japan and people in Australia, and it's so interesting. And so when COVID hit, we started actually doing Zoom sessions, and we've had tremendous success with those. And we've had the designer of Berlin Babylon from Germany. We had Barbara Ling, who won an Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We had Nathan Crowley, who just did Tenet, who's worked always with Christopher Nolan. And and James Chinlin come and talk to us about the Mandalorian setup and all that. And we talk about technology, we talk about practical. There is so much to learn, and there's so much to share, information to share. And there are many, many designers who feel that they want to share, and then there will be always people who don't, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. It's who we are as people and how we want to live our life is how we do it. So I think I'm just always naturally, I think I'm a champion of production design. I think that's who I am. And
well, you're inspiring lots of us, and we appreciate it so much. And I'm so excited for the rest of this season of Lovecraft Country and the rest of your work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. It would be interesting for me to go back to film, because so far television has given me more interesting opportunity, more challenge, bigger growth, kind of fascinating. I mean, Long Shot, I do want to say that Long Shot did have 100 sets, and we all did it in Montreal with 1 week in Colombia, because Montreal doesn't have palm trees. But I did manage to create Tokyo and Sweden and France and DC and New York and Washington, and you name it, we did it in it, and it was great. And so hopefully that's not my last film. But I feel television's really it's absolutely fascinating for me right now, in terms of what it's trying to do and the depth it gets into the character. So I think maybe because of the format, maybe because it has more time to build the characters over, you can really, really go into depth. And when we did Lovecraft, I just want to mention another thing. Our writers we asked them, give us your historical references, and they gave us a book list and a visual reference list, and it was incredibly helpful. And the things I learned, and really a lot of us are so ignorant about Tulsa and Emmett Till too, exactly how it happened and what happened, and many other historical things like that. And even, and I got a wind immediately that even our bar, for example, is called Denmark Vesey. I got a wind immediately, like, this name means something. So I would always look it up. And sure enough, if you look it up, there's a lot of history in every single choice that the writers made on Lovecraft Country. And it all ties to the history of Black people in this country for over 400 years. So there's a lot of interesting elements in it. And again, as I said, I'm always going to be a student. I'm always learning. And it was a very important project for me. And I think also because I come from a country of a persecuted family, in a country with a lot of political strife and problems, I think that makes you very empathetic to any group of people that have gone through such a struggle, and they have gone for 400 years through such a struggle. So it's a very powerful story on every level. And we are, as you pointed out, we are coming at a moment where the whole story has even another level of resonance that we did not expect to have last year while we were making it. But we always knew we were making something important, and incredibly fun. We had a great time.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I'm not going to take you much more of your time, but I appreciate it so much.
Oh, I hope you got enough.
Oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible. So thank you.
Thank you for choosing me, All right. Next time I'm in Atlanta, let's make sure we have coffee.
That would be amazing. That'd be amazing. Yeah.